I told him I forgave him, and he believed me. But what did I do next? Let's just say no one saw that coming, not even me. Have you ever looked someone in the eyes, told them everything was okay, while planning to burn down the lie they built behind your back? Would you be able to pretend, smile, kiss, laugh, knowing the whole time they had no idea what's coming? Because that's exactly what I did. I'm Legacy Robles. 36. Smart. Calm. Loyal to a fault, until someone pushes me too far. I wasn't always like this though. There was a time when I believed in forever, when I believed in him. Alistair Harrington. The man who swept me off my feet. When I say he was charming, I mean movie scene charming. Tall, with that British accent that made even the simplest words sound like poetry. He could read a wine list in French and make it feel like foreplay. We met at a gallery opening in Chicago. He was wearing this ridiculous dark green velvet blazer, standing in front of a blank canvas, sipping champagne like he knew what brushstroke meant what. I walked up, tilted my head, and said, "You do know that's just a wall they forgot to paint, right?" He laughed, and that was it. I was hooked. The next year was a blur of weekend trips, jazz bars, midnight phone calls, and stolen kisses. It wasn't just romance, it felt like magic. People used to stop us in restaurants to tell us how in love we looked. We even made each other playlists, for God's sake. Who still does that? He proposed in Santorini. One of those perfect nights with candles, ocean wind, and just enough wine to make you believe love could fix anything. And I said yes. Of course I did. I thought I'd hit the jackpot. Alistair wasn't just my husband, he was my home. At least, that's what I thought, until the cracks started to show. It started small. That's how betrayal usually does, right? Not with some dramatic reveal, but with the tiniest shift, the way someone flinches when you ask who they're texting, the longer than usual pauses before they answer. Little things that don't scream cheating, just whisper it. Alistair had started staying out late. Not crazy late, just late enough that I'd be in bed, eyes on the ceiling, telling myself not to overthink. He's just working. He's tired. He's building a future for us. That's what I told myself. Over and over. Like a lullaby I didn't believe anymore. Then came the phone calls. Quick ones. He'd step outside to take them, even if we were in the middle of dinner. Once, we were watching that old movie we loved, The Talented Mr. Ripley, and his phone buzzed. He looked at it, froze for half a second, then stood up and said, "Sorry, I need to take this." No explanation. No name. Just, gone. But the real punch in the gut? That came 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday that should have been ordinary. Grocery store run, yoga class, nothing special. I offered to take Alistair's car because mine had a flat. He hesitated, then tossed me the keys like it was no big deal. I should have known right then. I was tossing my bags into the back seat when I saw it. A scarf. Crushed under the passenger seat. Bright red silk, the kind that screams confidence and danger. I pulled it out slowly, like maybe it would disappear if I moved too fast. But it didn't. It was real. And worse? It smelled like her. Not perfume, but that mixture of sweetness and skin and something expensive I didn't recognize. There was lipstick smeared along one corner, deep crimson, not my shade. My hand shook. I stared at it for what felt like years, my heart pounding so hard I couldn't hear the street around me. I sat in that car with the scarf in my lap, my mind racing in every direction. Was it a client's? Was it a mistake? Was I losing it? But deep down, I already knew. Still, I didn't confront him. Not yet. I folded that scarf, tucked it into my purse, walked back into the house, and kissed him on the cheek like nothing happened. Because now I needed answers. Real ones. And if there's one thing I've learned, you don't get answers by screaming. You get them by listening when they think you're not. I held on to that scarf for days. Sometimes I'd open my drawer just to look at it, bright red, soft, smug. Like it knew something I didn't. I'd stare at it like it might talk, tell me everything I needed to know. But it just sat there, a quiet reminder that something sacred had been shattered. That's when I called Carly. Carly Wagner isn't just my best friend, she's the kind of woman who will show up at 2 a.m. with Thai food and bolt cutters if you need her. Loud, brilliant, sharp-tongued. She works in digital security, which basically means she can find out anything, if you ask nicely. Or if you cry. And I cried. We sat in her apartment, lights dim, laptops open, Thai food on the table between us. "Are you sure?" she asked, already opening her programs. I just nodded. She didn't ask again. "His password is probably some British nonsense," she muttered, fingers flying across the keyboard. "Teened Crumpets 123? Mr. Darcy 69? I almost laughed. Almost. 10 minutes later, she found it. An app one didn't even know he had. Encrypted messaging. Hidden under a folder labeled budget reports. Men really think they're clever. Carly clicked in, then leaned back slowly. "You ready?" I wasn't. But I said yes. The messages hit me like cold water to the face. Her name was Juliana Lane. Of course it was. Young. Flawless. Instagram model type. Her profile picture was her licking a spoon in a kitchen that looked staged for a cooking show. She had cheekbones that could cut glass and zero shame. I read everything. Everything. The first message was from him, "Last night was dangerous. I can't stop thinking about it." Then her reply, "Maybe next time you won't leave a scratch down my back where your wife might see it." Hashtag winking face. I felt my stomach drop. There were voice notes. Pictures. Little jokes about me. About how uptight I was. One message, burned into my brain, read, "She's the kind of woman who irons her sheets. No wonder you needed a little fire." I stopped breathing. Carly didn't say anything. Just reached over and grabbed my hand. That's the thing about best friends, they don't always give advice. Sometimes they just sit with you while your world falls apart. I didn't cry. Not right then. I stared at the screen, each word slicing through me with surgical precision. But instead of falling apart, something else lit up inside me. A calm. Cold. Focused. And a single thought. "Okay, Alistair. Let's see how much fire you can really handle." I didn't scream. I didn't throw things, or cry, or pack a bag and storm out the door like some dramatic movie scene. That would have been too easy for him. Too expected. And if there's one thing I knew for sure, it's this: Alistair Harrington never expected the quiet storm. So I waited. 2 days, maybe 3. I played the role, the wife. Smiled when he walked in, kissed his cheek, laughed at the right moments. I cooked his favorite dinner, lemon herb salmon, wild rice, roasted asparagus, and poured his favorite wine, the one he saves for anniversaries. He didn't suspect a thing. Later that night, we sat on the couch. Soft music in the background. Candles flickering like they'd forgotten who we really were. And I turned to him, resting my hand on his chest like I used to when I still believed in him. "Alistair," I said softly. His eyes met mine, guarded. "I know things have been off between us lately." He froze, lips parting slightly. I saw the panic start to crawl up his neck. "But," I continued, voice low and even, "I want to fix it. I forgive you." His whole body slumped, like I'd cut the strings holding him upright. He let out this broken little sound, half sigh, half whimper, and buried his face in his hands. Then the tears came. "I swear to God," he cried. "Legacy. I didn't mean to. I was stupid. It was a mistake. I felt so lost lately, but I love you. I never stopped loving you." I held him. Rubbed slow circles on his back like he was a scared child who'd had a nightmare. Whispered, "It's okay. I'm here." And the whole time, I kept my face soft. Calm. Loving. But inside? I was already tearing down the future we'd built, brick by brick. That's when I knew I had him exactly where I needed. Revenge doesn't come with fireworks. It comes quietly, like a slow breath before the plunge. And mine started the moment I kissed Alistair goodnight and smiled like I still loved him. The next morning, I called Anais. Anais Ochoa is the kind of woman men orbit without realizing they've lost control. Curves for days, a laugh like danger, and a wardrobe that could break up a marriage just by hanging in the closet. She's also fiercely loyal, especially when someone hurts one of her girls. I told her everything. Every ugly, burning detail. She didn't gasp. She just sipped her espresso and said, "So, how bad do you want him to beg?" "On his knees," I replied. "Say no more." 2 nights later, we were at a private charity gala, designer gowns, champagne fountains, egos the size of yachts. Alistair was working the room like always, pretending to care about fundraising while subtly checking himself in every reflective surface. And then Anais showed up. Scarlet dress. High slit. Red lipstick that matched the scarf I'd found in his car. Coincidence? Not a chance. I watched from across the ballroom as she glided over to him, smiled like they'd known each other in another life, and placed a perfectly manicured hand on his arm. She leaned in just enough to let her perfume, and her cleavage, do the talking. He didn't move away. Of course he didn't. They chatted, laughed, touched arms in that accidental way that's never actually accidental. Meanwhile, I stood next to Matthias Monroe, Alistair's business partner. Tall, polished, just the right amount of smirk. He and I had always had good chemistry, but tonight I turned it up. A gentle touch on the shoulder when I laughed. Holding his gaze a little longer than usual. At one point, I leaned in and said, "Funny, you always seem to understand me better than Alistair does." He looked surprised. Then I was intrigued. Then something else entirely. I could feel Alistair watching. And that's when I smiled to myself. Let him stew. Let him wonder. Because of confusion? That's the seed that grows into fear. But the real moves? Those weren't made on the dance floor. They were made in a quiet office on the 19th floor with Otto Benton, my attorney and longtime friend. Otto has a face like a judge and a voice like a therapist. Calm, steady, dangerous when necessary. "You're sure you want to do this quietly?" he asked, sliding a folder toward me. "Yes," I said. He doesn't even know I've seen the cracks. I want to move everything before he realizes I'm holding the match. Over the next week, Otto and I started moving funds. Small at first. Then more. I shifted accounts into my name, moved assets into trusts he couldn't touch. I even revised my will. Alistair thought we were rebuilding. That our late-night talks, our shared wine, our slow kisses meant healing. But I wasn't healing. I was planning. And the best part? He had no idea. His name was Winston Kane. I met him at a gallery downtown. It wasn't planned. I was just killing time, staring at a painting I didn't understand, pretending I wasn't waiting to feel something again. He walked up beside me, a tall, clean-shaven, deep voice that sounded like it had lived through 1,000 quiet heartbreaks. He didn't try to impress me. He didn't try to flirt. He just looked at the art and said, "Sometimes I think people paint what they're afraid to say out loud." And for the first time in weeks, I actually exhaled. Winston wasn't flashy like Alistair. He didn't wear designer suits or drop names. He was steady. Thoughtful. Quiet in the kind of way that made you lean in just to hear him. We started running into each other more often, coffee shops, galleries, even a bookstore where he left a note inside a poetry book I picked up. Pain creates. But healing chooses what to do with the creation. Who writes that? I didn't tell him anything right away. I didn't mention Alistair or Juliana or the scarf that still lived in the bottom of my drawer like a buried weapon. But Winston didn't push. He just listened to what I said, and more importantly, to what I didn't. One afternoon, we sat on a bench in Grant Park, warm coffee between us, sun painting everything gold. He looked at me, really looked at me, and said, "Whatever's breaking you, you're holding it with grace. But you don't have to carry it alone." My throat tightened. I turned away before the tears could win. Meanwhile, back at home, Alistair was starting to notice the shift. The softness he thought meant forgiveness? It was fading. I stopped waiting for him. I wore new perfume. I smiled at my phone just a little too long. And I let him see it. One night, he poured himself a scotch, leaned against the kitchen counter, and asked casually, "So, are you seeing someone?" I looked at him. Let the question hang in the air like smoke. "No," I said with a soft smile. And that wasn't a lie. Not yet. Revenge isn't rage. It's restraint. It's looking a man in the eye, smiling like he's your everything, and knowing you've already buried the version of yourself that ever needed him. The night of the company gala, I got dressed in silence. A deep emerald gown, backless, high-slit, classic but lethal. Alistair always said I looked like power in green. He had no idea how right he was. Winston picked me up just after 7. No questions, no expectations. He adjusted my coat like a gentleman and said, "Whatever happens tonight, you're not alone." I didn't respond. Just slipped my hand into his and smiled like a woman who had absolutely nothing left to lose. The venue was dripping with money, chandeliers, string quartet, trays of champagne floating through clusters of polished smiles and fake laughs. Alistair was already there, of course, surrounded by clients and board members, basking in the glow of his own reflection. Then he saw me. And he saw Winston. His smile faltered for a split second. That was all I needed. As we walked in, every eye turned. I was the headline and I knew it. I greeted people warmly, kissed cheeks, and shook hands. Alistair tried to play it cool, but I caught the way his jaw clenched when Winston placed a hand gently on my lower back. He came over eventually, of course he did. "Legacy," he said, voice calm but tight, "didn't realize you'd be bringing company." I smiled. "Oh, I figured we were both due for a little surprise." At 8:47 p.m., Carly hit send. All around the room, phones buzzed. Notifications popped. Confused glances turned into shock. Gasps. Whispers. People started murmuring, looking at their screens, then at Alistair. Then back at me. Screens showed texts. Photos. Voice notes. Juliana Lane in lingerie. Alistair's words, nasty, pathetic, undeniable. One board member, Peyton Lynch, turned to Alistair and muttered, "Jesus, man, during merger talks?" Enzo Andrews, one of his oldest investors, looked at me with something like admiration. "Well played," he said quietly before walking off. Alistair turned ghost white. "Legacy, what the hell is this?" I leaned in, close enough that only he could hear me, and whispered. "This is what forgiveness looks like. Polite. Patient. And planned." He reached for my arm, eyes wide. "We can fix this." I stepped back. "No, Alistair. You broke it. I just handed you the pieces." The day the divorce papers came, it was raining. Not the dramatic, stormy kind of rain movies used to signal chaos, just soft, steady, the kind that taps on your windows like it knows you're not okay but won't ask why. It felt fitting. I sat at my dining table, the one we picked out together in that overpriced boutique in Soho, pen in hand, papers spread before me. Alistair's name, my name, the unraveling of a life in cold, clinical paragraphs. It didn't feel like power. It felt like grief dressed in paperwork. Still, I signed. With every signature, I was cutting a cord. Bank accounts? Gone. Property? Transferred. Business shares? Liquidated. Thanks to Otto, every dollar he ever tried to hide was already reclaimed and redistributed. The house? Mine. The reputation? His to rebuild, if anyone even returned his calls. He tried, of course. Flowers. Letters. Begging voicemails at 2 a.m. I didn't answer. Not once. But the night after the papers were filed, when the house was too quiet and the wine hit just right, I broke. I curled up on the floor of my bedroom, buried my face in a blanket that still smelled like his cologne, and let the tears take me. Not because I missed him, but because I remembered loving him. I remembered believing him. That kind of betrayal doesn't just stab, it lingers. It keeps echoing even after the blade is gone. Winston came over the next morning. I didn't ask him to. I didn't have to. He didn't say a word when he saw my swollen eyes. Just walked in, sat beside me on the couch, and pulled me gently into his chest. We didn't talk. We didn't touch in any way that asked for more. He just held me. His heartbeat was steady. Grounding. The kind of quiet that made me feel safe without needing to explain anything. I didn't want grand declarations. I didn't need a new love story. I just needed someone who could sit with me in the wreckage and not ask me to sweep it up yet. And that's exactly what Winston did. People always talk about heartbreak like it's loud, like it comes crashing through the door, flipping tables, smashing windows. But the real kind? The kind that changes you? It's quiet. It slips in during dinner, it sits next to you in meetings, it waits for you at night when no one else is watching. I loved Alistair. That part wasn't fake. I meant every kiss, every anniversary toast, every quiet morning we spent drinking coffee on the patio talking about everything and nothing. But love doesn't excuse betrayal. And forgiveness? It doesn't mean forgetting. Signing those divorce papers wasn't the end of our story, it was the beginning of mine. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel unsure or unloved or like I had to fight for space in my own life. I felt steady. Strong. I thought forgiveness would feel like surrender. But it didn't. It felt like fire. Now when people ask how I got through it, I just smile. I let them wonder. I let them guess. Because the truth is, forgiveness isn't weakness. Sometimes, it's just the calm before the storm. And what happened after that night, what happened with Winston, what happened when Juliana came crawling back, and how Alistair tried to take it all one more time? Well, that's another story entirely.